Grüß dich, I'm Roberta, welcome to my kitchen, and this month we're in Switzerland, and one of the most Swiss side dishes I know is spätzli, or as the Swiss like to call it, knöpfli. Now the Germans make spätzli and so do the Austrians, but they miss the best part. They boil these little dumplings and then they serve them, which is fine. But the Swiss, the butter-loving Swiss, they pan fry them in butter. So they're firm and chewy, little bit crispy, little bit golden, and totally irresistible. So Swiss spätzli is what I'm going to teach you how to make today. Very simple: flour, salt, a little bit of nutmeg, some milk and some water and some eggs. We make a batter and then we boil it. Now, traditionally, the Swiss housewives talk about pouring the batter onto a wooden board and chopping it off the end. I think you have to have a Swiss Großmutti to show you how to do that, because I've never succeeded. Luckily, I have one of these, a spätzli pan, which makes it so easy because you pour the batter in, you rub it with a spatula, and these tiny little spätzli drop out into the boiling water. Unfortunately, these are hard to come by. Even in Switzerland, I've had trouble finding them. So I'm going to show you a super easy way that anyone can do it at home. You ready to get started? Let's go. So to make our batter, I have my milk and water in here. I'm going to add a couple of eggs and beat that all together. Just lightly with a fork is fine. You just need to break up those eggs well and truly. Then to our flour, we're going to add a good teaspoon of salt, crush that to get it in there, and a good grating of nutmeg. So you know by now how much I love my nutmeg. Don't be shy. I want to be able to smell that nutmeg in the finished batter. There we go. Now you make a bit of a well, and that nutmeg, I love it. We're going to stir in our liquid to make quite a wet batter, because we're going to drop splodges of this through a disposable piping bag into our water. Now let's just get that beaten up. You need a little bit of elbow grease, but not for long. You want it once your flour's all incorporated so it doesn't go flying everywhere. You need to give it a good beating for about 30 to 60 seconds. I'll show you how you know when it's ready. So after about a minute of strenuous beating, you'll see that it's starting to get quite stringy. That's what we want. And that just means that gluten's been activated enough that we're going to get nice chewy little dumplings. So now I'm just going to let that rest for about 5 minutes while I get everything else ready. We're going to put a large saucepan of water on to boil with the rule of thumb for pasta, 10 grams of salt for every litre of water. And while that's coming to the boil, our dough can be resting. Now, if you don't have a spätzli pan, this is what you're going to use. And if you're getting our recipe kit with ingredients, there'll be one of these in there, a disposable piping bag. You're probably familiar with them and have your own preferred way of using them. I like this handy tall glass to pop that in there and then fold the excess down. Open it up, and that's how I fill it. But if you've got a better method, let me know. I'd love to hear about it. In with our spätzli batter. Sometimes it gets a bit messy. Let's see how it goes. Okay, that's getting a bit full. Cut that off. It's the easiest way to clean it up. And give that a shake down. Open that up a bit more. Half the fun of working with a batter like this is that it's messy, isn't it? There we go. I was never one of those children that could be sent outside to play and stay clean. I always ended up messy within 5 minutes. There we go. Now this makes plenty of spätzli, but trust me, you're going to want to eat them all. Important that you don't cut too big a hole, because the smaller the spätzli are, the more surface area there'll be when we pan fry them, and the crisper and yummier they will be. So we're pushing that down, and we're just going to snip off an opening of about 1 centimetre. You can always make it bigger, but you can't make it smaller. So be careful to start with. I'm going to go about there. And then, this is where this glass comes in handy, because as soon as we put that down, the dough's going to roll out. So I pop it in the glass like that to take to the stove. My water's just started boiling behind me. The other thing you need is a big bowl of cold water. It doesn't need to be iced water, but just cold water from the tap, and a slotted spoon. Because we're going to have to make these spätzli individually. You'll see in a minute, we hold it over the water, we snip off little bits, and as soon as they float, like gnocchi, they're ready. So you can't make them all in one go. So I think it normally takes me 10 or 12 goes to use up all of that dough. It's kind of therapeutic. You get into the groove. Let's go to the stove and make spätzli. So salted water boiling, big bowl of cold water with our slotted spoon, our bag ready to go, and a pair of scissors. So to start with, I'm holding most of the batter down low because otherwise there's going to be a lot of back pressure, and we're just going snip, 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 snip repetitively. And you'll get 20 or 30 each go, and then you'll stop as they start to float to scoop them out. Shape doesn't matter. If they're a bit irregular, that's fine, because that's just going to give them more surface area to get crispy, but they tend to kind of find their own pattern. Small is good. You don't want them too thick because you don't want them doughy. You want them to cook through. So here's our last batch out of the water and into the water, out of the hot water and into the cold water, and then we'll drain them. So here's our nice cool spätzli. I'll just tip them into a colander and leave them to drain well. If you're making them the day before or several hours before, which you can do, once they're drained, I suggest you toss them just with a little bit of veggie oil, then you can put them in the fridge even overnight. If you're going to fry them in the next hour or so, I just leave them in the drainer like that. They're not going to stick together. That was the purpose of the water. We're going to melt some butter. Surprise, surprise, we are in Switzerland. Now this quantity, which is enough for 2 generously, you can pan fry. At home, I'm often making these for 10 people or so, in which case we melt the butter in a big baking dish, pop the spätzli in, toss it around, and pop it in the oven. So I wouldn't try and pan fry more than this quantity. Either way, you get a great result. Let's drain these and get frying. So we're melting our butter over a medium-high heat. Once it's nice and foaming like this, in go our well-drained spätzli. There's a lot of butter, but there's also a lot of spätzli. Give them a good toss around. We're going to fry them for about 5 minutes, maybe longer. And you don't want to stir them constantly because they need time to brown. So once they've got a good coating of butter, as these boys have now, we're just going to leave them for a few minutes to start to brown. So after a couple of minutes, we want to give them a good shake and a bit of a turn. They're browning up really nicely. Some of them may stick, that's okay, that just gives us crunchier bits. Now that's been about 5 minutes, and you can see we've got some nice crunchy bits there. You could certainly take them out now if you prefer them softer rather than crisper. I like them really crispy, so I'm going to give them a few more minutes. Now that's been about 8 minutes. Don't stir them too much or you're going to mash them. I like to move them around by giving them a good shake, and then just every now and then getting in there with the spatula. I think they're ready. Let's go. So here are our beautiful Swiss spätzli. A few little crunchy stuck ones there. Get rid of, oh no, we don't want to miss those ones. They'll be the best bits. We'll get rid of that. They do need a good dose of salt. Look at that. Yum. Now, this is the perfect side dish for our Voressen, which we're doing this week, but it's just as good with a mushroom sauce. It'd be fabulous with the Geschnatzliters from Zurich that we're doing. Really, it's fabulous with anything. I could just eat a big bowl of it on its own, but I don't recommend doing that. Swiss spätzli, enjoy. Aguetta.